The knife slipped from Precious's trembling fingers, clattering against the metal tray. Her vision blurred as hunger gnawed at her stomach, the same hunger she'd been fighting for 3 days straight. Around her, the evening campus crowd pushed past her small food stand, their laughter and chatter feeling like mockery to her empty belly. She'd cooked all day, sold almost everything, yet kept nothing for herself because the money was already spent before she'd even earned it. Rent, books, survival. She steadied herself against the rickety table, forcing her breathing to slow. This was Accra. This was university. This was the price of dreaming beyond your circumstances. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, the same words she'd heard since childhood. Feed others, and God will feed you. Precious had always found that advice frustratingly vague. But tonight, staring at the last portion of jollof rice and chicken she'd prepared, she understood it differently. She was starving, yes, but she was still standing. That had to count for something. The sun had nearly disappeared behind the campus buildings when she noticed him. A figure crumpled against the wall near the library, partially hidden by shadows. At first, she thought he was just another student sleeping off exhaustion, but something about his stillness felt wrong. The way his body curled inward spoke of pain rather than rest. Precious wiped her hands on her apron and squinted across the dimly lit pathway. He was Asian. Korean, maybe. That was unusual enough on this campus to draw attention. But what struck her most was the visible bruising on his face and the torn state of his clothes. Blood had dried on his temple, dark against his pale skin. Students walked past him without pause, some glancing with curiosity, others with outright suspicion. One group of boys laughed and made comments in Chui that made Precious's jaw tighten with anger. She looked down at the last plate of food, then back at the stranger. Her stomach growled in protest. That meal was supposed to be her dinner and tomorrow's breakfast combined. The sensible choice was obvious. Take care of yourself first. You can't pour from an empty cup. All the practical wisdom she'd heard her entire life. But Precious had never been particularly good at sensible choices. She picked up the plate, grabbed a bottle of water from her small cooler, and crossed the pathway. Up close, she could see he was probably in his mid-20s, though pain and exhaustion had carved years into his features. His breathing was shallow, and his eyes were closed. For a moment, she worried he might be seriously injured, but then his eyelids fluttered open at her approach. "Hi," she said softly, crouching down to his level. "You look like you could use this more than I can." His eyes were dark and wary, the eyes of someone who'd learned not to trust kindness. He stared at the plate, then at her face, searching for the catch. Precious knew that look. She'd worn it herself plenty of times. "It's just food," she assured him, setting it down within his reach. "No strings attached. You're hurt, and you need to eat. That's all this is." He didn't move for several long seconds. Then, slowly, painfully, he pulled himself into a sitting position. His hands shook as he reached for the plate, and Precious noticed the bruising extended down his arms. Someone had done a thorough job of beating him. "Thank you," he whispered in accented English. His voice was hoarse, barely audible. Precious nodded and stood to leave, but something made her pause. Maybe it was the way his hands trembled, or the tears that slipped silently down his cheeks as he took the first bite, or simply the recognition of someone as lost as she often felt. She sat down on the concrete beside him, not too close, just present. They didn't speak while he ate. He consumed the food slowly, carefully, like someone who understood the gift he'd been given. When he finished, he set the empty plate down and wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I'm Seo-Joon," he said quietly. "From Seoul. Precious. From right here in Accra." She smiled faintly. "You're a long way from home." "I don't have a home anymore." The words came out flat, factual, devoid of self-pity. "I don't have anything." Precious handed him the water bottle. "Well, now you have water. And a full stomach, at least for tonight. That's something." He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Gratitude, yes, but also confusion, as if kindness was a foreign language he'd forgotten how to speak. "Why did you help me? You don't know me. I could be dangerous." Before the story continues, kindly subscribe to this YouTube channel, like the video, comment, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the conclusion of this story and more intense stories like this. "You could be," Precious agreed, standing and brushing off her skirt. "But right now, you're just hurt and hungry. I know what that feels like." I know what it's like when people look past you like you're invisible. She picked up the empty plate. I'll be here tomorrow night too, same time. If you're still around and still hungry, there'll be food. She walked back to her stand before he could respond, her own stomach growling in protest at her decision. But as she packed up her things for the night, she caught him watching her from across the pathway, and something in his expression made her feel less alone than she had in months. Seo-Joon was there the next evening, and the evening after that, and every evening for the next 3 weeks. He never arrived empty-handed after that first night. Sometimes he brought small things, wildflowers picked from the campus gardens, a worn book in Korean that he said reminded him of better days. Once even a smooth stone he claimed would bring her luck. Precious accepted each offering with the same gentle smile, never asking questions, never pushing. Their conversations grew longer as his English improved, and her curiosity carefully unfolded. She learned he was 26, that he'd studied business in Seoul, that he loved rain and hated crowds. He learned she was 22, studying hospitality management between cooking shifts, that she'd raised herself after her mother died when she was 16, that she believed kindness was the only inheritance worth leaving behind. "You're too good for this world," Seo-Joon said one night, watching her portion out meals to students who barely acknowledged her existence. "People will take advantage of that." Precious shrugged, handing change to a customer. "Maybe, but I'd rather be taken advantage of than become the kind of person who stops seeing people's pain. The day I walk past someone suffering and feel nothing, that's the day I've lost what makes me human. Even if it costs you everything. Everything's relative when you start with nothing." She met his eyes steadily. "Besides, what's the alternative? Become hard? Become cruel? Protect myself so thoroughly that I forget why I'm protecting myself in the first place." She shook her head. "That's not protection. That's just a different kind of death." Seo-Joon looked away, but not before she saw something crack in his carefully maintained composure. "You sound like someone I used to know. Someone I failed." Precious wanted to ask who, wanted to understand the shadows that lived behind his eyes, but she'd learned that Seo-Joon's pain was like a wounded animal. Approached too directly, and it would retreat deeper into darkness. So instead, she simply handed him his meal and said, "Well, you're not failing right now. You're here, you're healing, and you're still fighting. That counts for something." As weeks became a month, the bruises faded from Seo-Joon's face, but the haunted look in his eyes remained. He started helping her pack up after her evening sales, carrying her heavy pots with a gentleness that suggested he understood what it meant to have so little. Other students began to notice him, whispering speculation about the quiet Korean man who appeared each evening like clockwork. "Is that your boyfriend?" a classmate asked Precious one afternoon, poorly concealed jealousy in her voice. "He's my friend," Precious replied simply. "He was hungry. I fed him. Now we're friends." It's not complicated, but it was becoming complicated in ways Precious hadn't anticipated. She found herself looking forward to their evening conversations with an intensity that frightened her. She'd spent so long surviving alone that she'd forgotten how it felt to be truly seen by another person. Seo-Joon didn't look at her with pity or judgment. He looked at her like she mattered, like her thoughts and dreams and struggles were worth his full attention. One evening, storm clouds gathered overhead as she finished serving her last customer. Rain in Accra could be violent and sudden, and Precious rushed to cover her supplies. Seo-Joon appeared from nowhere, helping her throw plastic tarps over everything just as the first heavy drops fell. "Come on," he shouted over the rising wind, grabbing her hand. They ran together toward the library, laughing breathlessly as rain soaked through their clothes. By the time they reached the covered entrance, they were drenched and shivering. "Your food," Precious gasped, suddenly remembering. "Already ate," Seo-Joon assured her, wringing water from his shirt. "I bought something from the cafeteria earlier. Saved you the trouble." Precious stared at him. "You bought food? Seo-Joon, where did you get money?" His expression shuddered immediately, that familiar wariness returning. "I've been doing small jobs. Translating documents for international students. Teaching Korean to anyone interested. Nothing illegal, I promise." "I wasn't accusing you of anything illegal," Precious said gently. I'm glad you're getting back on your feet." "That's good. That's really good." They sat on the library steps, watching rain pour from the sky in silver sheets. The campus had emptied quickly, leaving them in a bubble of relative privacy. Seo-Joon was quiet for a long time, his profile sharp against the gray evening light. I need to tell you something, he finally said, his voice barely audible over the rain. About why I was here. Why I was the way you found me. Precious's heart quickened, but she kept her voice calm. You don't owe me explanations, Seo-Joon. I know, but you deserve truth. He took a shaky breath. My family in Korea, they're not good people. Powerful, yes. Rich, yes. But not good. I tried to leave that world, tried to build something clean and honest. They didn't allow it. They sent people after me, people who made it very clear what happens to family members who betray the organization. Organization, Precious repeated carefully. You mean like crime family, mafia, whatever word makes it real for you. His laugh was bitter. I ran, made it all the way here, thought I could disappear, start over. But they found me anyway, beat me as a warning, told me I could come home and accept my place, or they'd make sure I never had peace anywhere. Precious absorbed this information slowly, watching rain create rivers across the concrete steps. She should have been afraid. Any rational person would be. But looking at Seo-Joon's hunched shoulders and the shame radiating from him, all she felt was sadness for the weight he'd been carrying alone. So what did you tell them? She asked quietly. Nothing yet. They gave me time to think, to decide if I want to live. He turned to face her, and the raw vulnerability in his eyes made her chest ache. I was ready to give up, Precious. That night you found me, I'd already decided. No more running, no more fighting. Just let it end. But you didn't. No, because this strange, beautiful woman kept feeding me, kept talking to me like I was worth something, kept showing me that kindness still exists in the world, even when everything else feels rotten. He reached out hesitantly, and Precious took his hand without thinking. You reminded me that I used to be someone better, someone who believed in good things. They sat in silence, fingers intertwined, watching the storm rage. Precious knew she should probably be frightened of the danger he represented, the violence that might follow him. But fear felt distant compared to the overwhelming certainty that this moment mattered, that this connection was something rare and precious in its own right. What will you do? She finally asked. Seo-Joon's grip tightened on her hand. I don't know. Going back means becoming everything I hate. Staying means putting you and everyone around me at risk. There's no good choice. There's always a choice, Precious said firmly. It might not be easy or safe or fair, but it exists. You just have to be brave enough to make it. He smiled sadly. You make it sound simple. I didn't say simple. I said possible. She squeezed his hand. Whatever you decide, Seo-Joon, you're not alone in this. Not anymore. The rain eventually softened to a drizzle, and they walked back to Precious's stand together. Most of her supplies had stayed dry under the tarps, a small miracle. As she organized everything for the next day, Seo-Joon stood watching with an expression she couldn't quite read. Precious, he said suddenly. If things were different, if I was different, if I had something to offer you beyond danger and darkness, would you? He stopped, shaking his head. Never mind. Stupid question. But Precious understood what he couldn't quite ask. She set down the pot she'd been holding and faced him directly. You think you have nothing to offer because you don't have money or safety or a clear future. But Seo-Joon, you've given me something I haven't had in years. Someone who sees me, really sees me. Not the poor girl selling food, not the charity case, not the struggling student. Just me. That's worth more than you know. His eyes glistened with unshed tears. I don't deserve you. Nobody deserves anybody, Precious replied. We just decide who we want to stand beside and hope they want the same thing. That night, Seo-Joon walked her home for the first time, carrying her heavy pots without complaint. They talked about everything and nothing, their conversation flowing easily from Korean poetry to Ghanaian folktales to their shared love of thunderstorms. At her door, a tiny room in a shared house that she could barely afford, he set down her supplies and hesitated. Thank you, he said, for everything. For feeding me when I was starving. For talking to me when I was invisible. For making me remember what it feels like to be human. Precious smiled. That's what friends do. Is that what we are? Friends. The question hung between them, loaded with possibility and danger and hope. Precious knew the smart answer, the safe answer. But she'd never been good at safe. I think we're whatever we need to be for each other, she said carefully. Right now, maybe that's friends. Tomorrow, who knows? Let's just take it one day at a time. Seo-Joon nodded, but something in his expression had shifted, hardened with determination. One day at a time, he agreed. But Precious, I need you to know something. Whatever happens, wherever this life takes me, I won't forget what you've done. I won't forget who you are. Over the following weeks, Seo-Joon seemed to grow more settled, more present. He found more translation work, started saving money, even talked about enrolling in courses at the university. Precious watched him transform from the broken stranger she'd found into someone with purpose and direction. It filled her with quiet pride. But she also noticed the moments when his phone would buzz and his entire body would tense. The way he'd scan crowds with hypervigilance. The nights he'd show up with fresh bruises he'd try to hide. He was still being watched, still being pressured, still caught between the life he wanted and the one being forced upon him. They're getting impatient, he admitted one evening, his voice tight with stress. My family. They want an answer. They want me home. And what do you want? Precious asked. He looked at her with such longing it made her breath catch. I want to stay here. I want to build something real. I want to wake up every morning without violence hanging over my head. He stopped himself, but the unspoken words lingered between them. Then stay, Precious said simply. Fight for what you want. It's not that easy. You don't understand the kind of power my family has. The reach they have. If I refuse them outright, they'll make an example of me. And anyone close to me. So you're just going to give up? Let them win. I'm trying to keep you safe. The words burst from him with unexpected intensity. Don't you understand? Every day I stay here, I put you in more danger. These are not people who forgive betrayal. These are not people who show mercy. Precious stepped closer, refusing to back down from his fear. Then let me make my own choices about what risks I'm willing to take. I'm not some fragile thing that needs protecting from reality, Seo-Joon. I've survived plenty without you, and I'll survive whatever comes. But I won't stand here and watch you surrender your entire future because you're trying to protect me from choices I haven't even been allowed to make. They stared at each other, the air crackling with tension and unspoken emotions. Finally, Seo-Joon's shoulders sagged in defeat. You're the strongest person I've ever met. And the most stubborn. I'll take that as a compliment. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It was meant as one. That night felt different somehow, charged with an urgency neither of them acknowledged directly. They talked until the campus emptied completely, until security guards started making their rounds, until the only sounds were distant traffic and night insects. Seo-Joon told her about Seoul, about the brother he'd lost to the family business, about the mother who'd tried to protect him until she couldn't anymore. Precious shared memories of her own mother, the way she'd taught her that feeding people was an act of love, that generosity was the truest measure of character. She sounds remarkable, Seo-Joon said softly. She'd have liked you, I think. She always said you could tell a person's heart by how they treat those who can do nothing for them. Precious smiled sadly. You treated me with respect when you had every reason to take what was offered and disappear. That would have mattered to her. I could never just disappear on you, Seo-Joon said, and something in his tone made Precious's heart skip. Precious, I need to tell you something. Something I should have said weeks ago. Before he could continue, his phone buzzed insistently. He glanced at the screen, and Precious watched all color drain from his face. I have to go. Right now. Seo-Joon, what? Please. Just trust me. Go straight home. Lock your door. Don't answer for anyone you don't know. He was already backing away, his expression a mixture of fear and determination. I'll explain everything tomorrow. I promise. But there was no tomorrow. Not the way Precious had hoped. She waited at her usual spot the next evening, her heart performing anxious gymnastics every time someone approached. Students came and went, buying their meals with casual indifference to her growing panic. The sun set. The campus emptied. Seo-Joon never appeared. Days bled into a week. Precious told herself he was busy, that something had come up, that he'd return with a reasonable explanation and that familiar gentle smile. But deep down, she knew. The way he'd looked at his phone that last night, the urgency in his voice, the promise he'd made before disappearing, it all pointed to one conclusion. They'd taken him back. His family, his past, the violent world he'd tried so desperately to escape. They'd reclaimed him, and he'd gone rather than put her at risk. The realization hollowed her out, leaving an ache she couldn't name. She searched for him, of course, asked around campus, checked with the translation services he'd mentioned, even contacted the Korean embassy with a desperation that embarrassed her later. Nothing. Seo-Joon had vanished as completely as if he'd never existed. Life continued because it had to. Precious cooked and sold and studied and survived, the same daily rhythms that had defined her existence before Seo-Joon appeared. But something fundamental had shifted. She'd allowed herself to hope, to connect, to imagine a future that included someone who truly saw her. And that hope had been torn away without warning or closure. Her classmate found her crying one evening, tears dripping into the jollof rice she was stirring. "Precious, are you okay?" "Fine," she lied, wiping her face with her sleeve. "Just smoke from the fire." But she wasn't fine. Some nights, she'd catch herself setting aside food for him, muscle memory overriding rational thought. Other times, she'd turn expecting to see him and find only empty space. The absence of someone she'd known for barely 2 months shouldn't have felt this devastating, but grief had never been logical. Months became a year, then 2, then 5. Precious graduated, started working at a hotel restaurant, built a modest catering business on the side. She dated occasionally, men who were kind and steady and safe, but none of them could reach the place Seo-Joon had occupied. Eventually, she stopped trying, accepting that some connections were singular, unrepeatable. 8 years after Seo-Joon disappeared, Precious entered a charity cooking competition almost on a whim. The prize was substantial, enough to expand her catering business significantly, but what really caught her attention was the sponsored trip to South Korea for the winner. She told herself it was about the opportunity, about exposure to Korean cuisine and potential business contacts. She didn't let herself think about the small, irrational hope that maybe, somehow, she might find answers to questions that still kept her awake some nights. The competition was fierce, talented chefs from across Ghana showcasing their skills. But Precious had something most of them lacked. She cooked with story, with memory, with the kind of emotional honesty that made food transcend mere nutrition. Her grandmother's groundnut soup, her mother's kelaweel recipe, even the jollof rice she'd perfected selling to hungry students. Each dish carried love and loss and survival. When they announced her name as the winner, she felt oddly detached from the celebration around her. This was supposed to be her triumph, her breakthrough moment. Instead, all she could think about was a promise made in darkness by someone who disappeared before dawn. Seoul was overwhelming in ways Accra had never prepared her for. The endless skyscrapers, the crowds, the technology integrated into every aspect of daily life. It all felt simultaneously thrilling and alienating. The charity organization had arranged everything meticulously, from her hotel accommodations to her scheduled cooking demonstrations at various cultural centers. But from the moment Precious arrived, she felt watched. Nothing overt, just the prickling sensation of eyes tracking her movements, shadows that seemed too deliberate to be coincidental. "You're being paranoid," she told herself, unpacking in her pristine hotel room overlooking the Han River. "This is a foreign country. Everything feels strange." But the feeling persisted through her first cooking demonstration, through the media interviews, through the tour of traditional markets. Men in dark suits appeared at the periphery of every event, never approaching but always present. Her translator, a cheerful woman named Min-ji, noticed Precious's unease. "Are you all right? You seem nervous." "Those men," Precious said carefully. "The ones in suits. Are they part of the event security?" Min-ji followed her gaze and frowned. "I don't think so. Our security wears different uniforms." "Why? Are they bothering you?" "No, just watching." That evening, returning to her hotel, Precious found an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a single card with an address written in elegant script and a brief message. "You are safe. You have always been safe." No signature, no explanation. Her hands trembled as she read it. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but something about the message resonated with painful familiarity. She should have ignored it, should have reported it to hotel security or the competition organizers. Instead, she found herself memorizing the address, curiosity and old heartbreak overriding common sense. The next day, she convinced Min-ji she needed personal time to explore the city. The address led to an upscale neighborhood in Gangnam, buildings of glass and steel that spoke of serious wealth. Precious stood outside the specified location, a luxury office building, feeling completely out of place in her simple dress and worn shoes. "Miss Precious." A man approached, his English accented but clear. He was young, professionally dressed, with the kind of watchful alertness she'd seen in the suited men following her. "Please, come with me. You're expected." Every survival instinct screamed at her to run. Instead, she heard herself say, "Expected by whom?" "Someone who has waited a very long time to see you again." Her heart stuttered. "I don't understand." "You will. Please." He gestured toward the building entrance, patient but insistent. Precious followed him through a lobby that screamed wealth and power, into a private elevator that required a special key card. They ascended in silence, her reflection in the mirrored walls showing a woman considerably older than the girl who'd once fed a stranger with her last portion of food. What was she doing here? What did she expect to find? The elevator opened directly into a penthouse office, all floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture that probably cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime. And there, standing with his back to her, looking out over the Seoul skyline, was a man whose silhouette made her breath catch. "Thank you, Jin-ho. Leave us." The voice was deeper, hardened by years and authority, but unmistakably familiar. The young man who'd escorted her bowed and retreated into the elevator. Precious stood frozen, her entire body trembling. Slowly, he turned to face her. 8 years had transformed Seo-Joon from the broken stranger she'd known into something almost unrecognizable. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. His hair was styled with precision, his posture radiating power and control. But his eyes, those dark, haunted eyes, were exactly as she remembered. "Precious." Her name on his lips shattered something inside her. "You bastard," she whispered, and then louder. "You absolute bastard." 8 years. 8 years and not a single word. Not a message, not a letter, nothing. "I couldn't." "Don't." She held up a shaking hand. "Don't you dare tell me you couldn't. You disappeared. You made promises, and then you vanished like I meant nothing. You meant everything." The words exploded from him with unexpected violence. "You meant so much that leaving you was the only way to keep you alive. Do you understand? My family didn't just want me back. They wanted leverage. They wanted to know what mattered to me so they could control me. And I couldn't let them know about you. So you just left. Without explanation. Without goodbye. They were watching. That last night, they sent word, come home immediately or they'd start hurting people I cared about. I had hours to decide. Hours to choose between going back to hell or watching them destroy an innocent woman who'd shown me kindness when I deserved nothing." Precious felt tears burning down her cheeks. "You should have told me. You should have let me decide. You would have done something noble and stupid, like trying to help. And they would have killed you, Precious. Not quickly, not mercifully. They would have made it hurt, made me watch, made sure I understood the cost of defiance." His voice broke. "I couldn't risk that. I couldn't risk you. So what is this?" She gestured at the opulent office, at him. "You went back. You became what you were running from. I had no choice. They gave me two options, join the family business or be buried beside it. So I joined. I learned. I became useful. And then I became powerful. Powerful enough that even my father had to respect me. Powerful enough to protect the things that matter." "Things," Precious repeated bitterly. "Is that what I am to you? A thing to protect? You're the only good thing I've ever done. The only pure memory in 8 years of blood and violence and moral compromise." He took a step toward her, hands raised as if approaching something fragile. "I've had people watching you since the day I left, making sure you were safe, that you succeeded, that nothing touched you. Every achievement, every struggle, every moment, I knew. I've always known." The revelation should have angered her, but instead it made her feel invaded, violated. "You had no right. I had every right. I made you a promise, remember? When I'm rich, I'll come back and marry you. Well, I'm rich now, Precious. Richer than I ever imagined. Powerful enough to give you anything you want. I never wanted your money." The words tore from her throat. "I fed you because you were hungry. I talked to you because you were alone. I cared about you because you were human, not because of what you could give me in return. And you think you can just summon me here, flash your wealth, and I'll what? Be grateful? Be impressed." Seo-Joon's carefully maintained composure cracked, revealing the pain beneath. "I don't know what I expected. Maybe that you'd understand. Maybe that enough time had passed for the anger to fade. Maybe I'm just foolish enough to hope that some part of you still remembers what we had. What we had. Precious laughed, the sound harsh and broken. We had stolen moments and impossible dreams and a future that never existed. That's all it was, Seo-Joon. A beautiful lie. It wasn't a lie. He closed the distance between them, and Precious could see tears tracking down his face despite his efforts to maintain control. You were the realest thing in my life. You still are. Everything else, this power, this wealth, this entire empire I've built, it's all just survival. But you, Precious, you made me feel alive. She wanted to stay angry, wanted to hold on to her righteous fury. But looking at him now, seeing the boy she'd fed beneath the armor of the man he'd become, her resolve wavered. Why bring me here? Why now? Because I'm done hiding. Done pretending. Done living in a world where I can't even acknowledge the person who saved me. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. I wanted to see you. To thank you. To tell you that your kindness changed everything, even if I couldn't show it. And maybe, selfishly, to see if there's any possibility that after all these years, after all I've done, you might still. An explosion shook the building, cutting off his words. Glass rattled in its frames, and somewhere below, alarms began shrieking. Seo-Joon's expression transformed instantly from vulnerable to lethal, his entire body shifting into combat readiness. Get down. He was already moving, phone to his ear, barking orders in rapid Korean. More men in suits burst from concealed doors Precious hadn't noticed, weapons drawn, surrounding her in a protective formation. What's happening? Precious demanded, fear finally overtaking shock. Seo-Joon's eyes were hard as he listened to whoever was reporting. My rivals. They found out about you. About how much you matter. He looked at her, and in his expression she saw fury and fear and terrible understanding. This is exactly what I was afraid of. I brought you here, and now they're coming for you. Another explosion, closer this time, and the world tilted into chaos. To enjoy more stories, kindly subscribe to the YouTube channel, like the video, comment, and turn on notifications so you don't miss more intense stories like this.